pastoring is an instinct to go towards people. So it's going out of your way to contact, even if somebody's maybe on the fringe of the church, saying, how can I go towards this person? And you can feel a little bit nervous about doing so. You know, what would they make of me? Will they even understand that? Yeah. I mean, there's people who come to churches who aren't used to visits from the pastor. That's the thing about small church. We've had people from larger churches or city areas come, and they're slightly freaked out by the fact that people want to know them and the pastor wants to visit.
Yeah, they wonder what you're coming for.
Yeah. Whereas that's, and after a while, find that good, like it.
Hello and welcome to Independence, the FIEC podcast. My name is Adrian Reynolds. I'm head of National Ministries for the FIEC, and I'm joined today by Pete Campbell. Hello, Pete. Nice to see you.
Hello there.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Glad
Good.
to be
You had an early start today to get here. So, what time are you up this morning to get here?
I was up before 6. Left the house at 6.
Well, McDonald's breakfast then on the way.
Yeah, okay. Definitely.
So you're nicely full of food. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be talking about pastoral care a little bit today. But Pete, tell us a little bit about the church so we can sort of set it in context. Tell us exactly where it is and tell us a little bit about the kind of the nature of the church, will you?
Okay, so I'm the pastor of Capel Fron, Penrhyndeudraeth. I understand that's difficult for a lot of people to say.
I'm not even going to attempt to say that. Okay.
So it's in northwest Wales. The way I always explain it is if Anglesey is the head and the Llŷn Peninsula is the arm, we are right in the armpit. So just outside Snowdonia.
That could be taken the wrong way.
Yeah, I know.
So, I mean, lots of people from the FIEC used to come to, I'm going to say this wrong, I realise, Pwllheli.
Yeah, Pwllheli.
For the FIEC conference. So not a million miles from there.
No,
okay.
Very close.
Yeah, okay.
And so we're a church that was planted in the 60s, kind of early 70s, coming out of work. A Grace Baptist pastor called Mike Perrin established a young people's work called the Christian Mountain Centre. Right. And very soon after that, there were conversions with English speakers and Welsh speakers, and a gospel church came out of that and joined the FIEC.
So you must have the best backdrop of any church in the FIEC, I think, looking out the window.
Well, the window of the toilet is amazing.
Okay.
It's overlooking the Reenog Mountains. You can see Harlech Castle. So
the toilet is the place to go for the view.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the area. What's the area like, and what's the community you're in like?
So it's a village of about 1,500 people. Okay. We've got Porthmadog nearby, which is 5,000 or 6,000 people. It's the Welsh language heartlands. So the village is 75% Welsh speaking, and it is a big tourist area. So I think Snowdonia gets something like 2 to 3 million tourists a year. And we're right in the heart.
So does that have that must have an effect on the church, doesn't it? Does the church kind of change in the summer?
Yeah.
So season?
We're used to getting holiday makers. A lot of people from all kinds of different churches come. There's not many English language services locally. There's churches in Criccieth nearby, in Bala and in Bangor, but people have got to seek those out. Yeah. So we do. Yeah. Our congregation goes up in summer.
And is the church itself English speaking?
Yeah,
I had a look at the website, dual language website.
Yes,
but an English speaking church. Is that right?
Yeah. So the way that we've said it, we went through some vision and values a few years ago, is that we conduct ourselves in the medium of English. I'm an English speaker. I don't speak Welsh, but we're not an English church. Okay. So that we have English and Welsh speakers, and we want to be flexible and adaptable, and we want to reach out to the community as well.
How does that actually cash out? Do you end up doing some things in Welsh? Not you personally, obviously, but
they have in the past. We do, and we probably. You could do a whole other podcast on bilingualism.
Indeed. Well, that's a good. We'll note that one down. That's a good one to do.
It's a big issue. Yeah. Without going fully bilingual, I think an empathy for Wales and the Welsh language, but in English, I think people still regard us as an outsider church.
Okay. I was going to say, are people slightly suspicious of that? Sort of people
I think so.
Welsh speakers?
It's hard to convey how much the heart language means to people, especially in the area that we're in, and how aware they are of a kind of English gentrification.
Yeah. And I guess with all the sort of holiday business coming in. That must be especially so.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell us a little bit of the church. What sort of size is it? What other people have you got serving with you?
35 members.
Yep.
Probably. Well, at the moment, we've been, because there's restrictions, we've been 30 people meeting in the community hall. But we hope to get 40 or 50 on a Sunday morning. So I'm the sole paid employee. The pastor, I have another elder with me, a deacon in the church, a team of men and women who help and serve in different ways.
And what sort of age profile in the church?
We're definitely in the 60 and above.
Okay.
A couple of young families.
Do people, to sort of younger people in the area, tend to move out when they sort of do that sort of university thing, go away and never come back? Is that a kind of the pattern?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not many kind of professional jobs around, so you don't get people moving to the area with a young family. So there's definitely in Wales the move towards Cardiff.
Yeah. Now, if you're not a Welsh speaker, $1 million question: what took you there in the first place?
That's a good point.
So, what's your story, briefly?
My story was that I was raised in a C of E going home in Sandhurst.
Where we first met, actually, many years ago. Yeah.
And it was at uni that I had a real awakening to the gospel. I was at uni in Swansea. I stayed there, worked with UCCF for a year. I stayed in a small church on a council estate there. They trained me up for Christian ministry. I ended up going up to Mid Wales, serving at a Baptist church in Mid Wales, Penrhyndeudraeth, Wales. And when I was looking at ministry, I was preaching at churches. I just had a real unity with the leadership there. There was a warmth, and it wasn't really a move based on the language or the culture. I knew I wanted to reach out in a small area in Wales. It was more the godliness of the congregation and their love for each other and their love for the Lord that attracted me to the church. So,
and tell us about family.
Family, 4 kids, and I'm a lovely wife, Rachel. Okay,
and what age are the kids?
They are 12, 10, 8 and 5.
It's a full-time job looking after them, I should think.
Yeah, it is for each. So, yeah.
Now, we want to talk a little bit about pastoral care. And obviously, pastoral care is very contextual, isn't it? Because it's going to depend on the size of church, the kind of people that you're ministering to, and all sorts of questions that we're well aware of. But there are a huge number of churches in the FIEC, which are just like yours.
Yeah.
When I say yours, I mean the one you're serving in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
A huge number of churches that are that kind of 35 sort of size. There's maybe one paid worker, maybe he might even be part-time. So there are limited resources. So just tell us how, just in broad terms, first of all, how does pastoral care, do you think, fit into the life of the church generally?
I think when I came to the church, they very much wanted, there's a lot of smaller churches, they still want a pastor. So they wanted preaching and they wanted care in their lives. They wanted that kind of pastoral leadership, and it was something that they really valued. It's very much like a more traditional kind of, people talk about the corner shop model, where the pastor does quite a lot. Now, I wouldn't claim to do it all in the church. I've got a wonderful fellow elder who does so much pastoral care with me. But it is very much that pastoral kind of corner shop model, which I've realised, don't knock it too much, because in our context, it really works. So
you're not a specialist in that sense. You're a generalist.
Yeah. So and so being among the people, visiting, being in the village, being involved in people's lives, it is really, really key. It is kind of what people want and expect, and it also opens up opportunities.
Now, you were telling me earlier, just as we were chatting upstairs, that you had a sort of almost a bit of an epiphany, sort of moving from this transition of thinking you want to be a preacher to wanting to be a pastor. What's the connection, do you think, with good local church preaching and good pastoral care? Are they two separate things, or are they more connected than that?
Oh, they're really connected. I was thinking 1 Peter 5, pastor the flock that's among you. Yeah. So it suggests proximity. And so it's not just a, demolishing people with wandering wonderful, staggering sermons and they're changed. There's got to be a relational proximity and amongness of being with people. And small church ministry is wonderful, but it's very challenging, but it gives that proximity that I can have a relationship with most people in the church and they can see that word that you're preaching worked out in your life. So, yeah, I think very much when I felt a call to ministry, I was very focused on the preaching and I wanted to communicate well and clearly.
Yeah, and it's a very tangible thing, isn't it, to put your efforts behind it?
Yeah. And you're very much thinking about how you break down a text and stuff. The pastoral stuff I was kind of worried about, because you're dealing with grown-ups and older people.
So can I ask you, how old were you when you went to the church, first of all?
I was 30.
Okay.
Just under 30. And when I started in ministry, I can remember my first visit to a older lady in church, and she just ran rings around like, oh dear me, I'm not doing that again. And so but then you realise the real value of doing that kind of meeting and how you can help and stuff. So
how did you learn that stuff?
Watching people, watching pastors. So when I was in Swansea, watching the pastor there, being alongside him, particularly being in Mid Wales, spent 3 years funded by the church, and really they wanted to invest. And that Monday morning that we'd spend together, breaking down the Sunday, talking about the pastoral visits, watching it happen. And I really advise people to spend time with people who are instinctively pastoral and make as many different friends in ministry who have different emphasis and ways of doing it. Just observing people's pastoral hearts is really important.
And how does that, what does a pastoral week look like for you now? Obviously, there's no standard week, but is there a pattern to it at all? What does it look like for you in church life?
Yeah, I know that people have shepherding plans and get through their membership. It's a lot more on the fly than that, but it does look like...
Well, that's honest. I think that's the reality of church life, isn't it? That some people are more demanding than others, some people are needier than others.
Yeah. So Monday is starting the sermons off for the week to come and recovering a bit from Sunday and praying. Key meeting over the last 10, 11 years has been the kind of Tuesday meeting with my elder in his living room. And I say my elder, we belong to each other, but we kind of talk together. We don't really have an agenda for that. We talk about the Sunday, we talk about what's happening in church. A lot of the time spent talking about people and how we can help and time praying for them. Yeah. And that's a big time.
So just tell me a little bit more about him. Sorry, I'm stopping you at Tuesday. Yeah. So keep that in mind, Tuesday. Tell me a little bit more about him. He sounds like a key guy in the church.
Oh, he is. The church was without pastor for quite a while, and he was the kind of sole elder with 2 deacons during that time. And he just did a wonderful job. When I came to the church, it was funny, you get that transition time where people are, they're kind of sussing you out, but they talk to Phil and they want to see Phil and they're him and his wife just had a massive impact. So I think that's the other thing to raise, aren't there? There are people doing pastoral care who aren't in paid full-time ministry. In effect, they're pastors.
They might not even be recognised by the church. There's kind of care going on lots of different levels, isn't there?
And they might even themselves think they're not doing much, but they're doing huge amounts.
So you meet once a week with him?
Yeah, generally once a week, and we pray and we talk, and that's been extremely valuable.
So there's this. We do a similar thing. We're a slightly larger church than you, but not a huge amount larger. We meet in the evenings, but we make sure that we have two. In fact, we have 2 different kinds of elders meetings at church. We have what we call an elders business meeting, where we do the kind of standard stuff. And what we used to do then was we used to have an item on the agenda which was sort of pastoral issues, and inevitably it's always at the fag end of the meeting. You're always tired and want the meeting to end, and so you never give it good time. So now we meet twice a month. We have one meeting which is just business, and we have one meeting which is just pastoral care. And we have a list of people who come to church, members, children, non-members, and we work through it. We take, we're a bit more methodical, perhaps that's because we're slightly larger, but we take 5 men, we take 5 women, 5 kids, and we talk about them, we pray for them all by name, and then some, if there are any emergency situations. But I think we're saying a similar thing, aren't we? Which is that focus on people pastorally
Yeah.
rather than just the business of church is a really healthy place to be, I think, for a leader.
Yeah, and if I was doing it by myself with a list and it was just me to do that relationally with a fellow elder, it keeps me accountable.
Sure.
And it's really helpful.
Okay. So we got to Tuesday. Tuesday lunchtime.
Tuesday lunchtime. And I guess then there's a mixture of reactive and proactive stuff.
Okay.
So there are people who are just in touch, people who are ill, people who are going through a particular season, questions sometimes on the Sunday sermon. So there's things to check out. But then also, I'm not so great at this, but proactively thinking, who can I?
Yeah.
I guess a key thing is pastoring is an instinct to go towards people. So it's going out of your way to contact, even if somebody's maybe on the fringe of the church, saying, how can I go towards this person? And you can feel a little bit nervous about doing so. What will they make of me? Will they even understand that? Yeah. I mean, there's people who come to churches who aren't used to visits from the pastor. That's the thing about small church. We've had people from larger churches or city areas come, and they're slightly freaked out by the fact that people want to know them and the pastor wants to visit.
Yeah, they wonder what you're coming for.
Yeah. Whereas that's, and after a while, find that good, like it. So trying to have maybe 2 or 3 proactive planned visits to see people. Oh, can I come and see you in the evening? Can I come and see what you're doing? I mean, it's a lot of my congregation are retired, so it's no big thing. It's maybe a couple of people in work. Try and combine those kind of things.
There's an awful lot of giving out there, Pete. You're meeting with different people.
Yeah.
Listening to their joys, listening to their struggles. It's quite an emotional, full-on emotional thing. How do you guard your own heart in that? That's something I've learnt to do. It is. I found that probably 5 years, 6 years in, just the emotional caring for people kind of quite a toll. Certainly, which I think probably, I did as a young pastor.
Yeah.
You do underestimate, don't you?
Yeah. And also the feeling of, I've described it as the reverse Midas touch. You go through seasons where everything you touch seems to be going wrong, and and that can be
which
heavy.
can just make you question calling and are you in the right place and all those kinds of things.
Oh, definitely. Time. Not having too high a standards of yourself.
Just say a little bit more about that. That sounds intriguing. That sounds as though you're setting the bar very low, but I think you're saying something slightly different to that. So tell us a bit more about that.
So obviously, if you're going into pastoral ministry, I remember hearing John Thomas saying in a talk, he's a pastor in Abergavenny. If you're in pastoral ministry, it's probably because you're quite a sensitive person generally. Not everybody, but generally sensitive. So it means you spend a lot of time thinking about things and weighing on things, and probably have quite high standards for yourself. And I think the New Testament does have high standards for pastors and care, and that's a good thing. It's just when they become a kind of rule system or a perfection that we are people who stand before God in the love of the shepherd. We're sheep before we're shepherds. We're cared for. And so that's...
And there is a chief shepherd.
Yeah. And you're not in control of it. And there is... I've been thinking a lot about Psalm 147, about how the Lord... There's a wonderful... He gathers his flock and his power, he numbers the stars, and he's able to gather the outcasts of Israel, and that God is working above and beyond your pastoral efforts. There's always situations that just look a mess and you don't see the end of or the end of the page, but God is able to redeem that and gather his people to himself. So resting in God's grace, that's what we're talking about, aren't we? Like, how do you, perfectionism, rest. I didn't say a key thing on Monday. My wife is a full-time mum. Monday is going for coffee with my wife, So that's a big thing. Friendship with other pastors, friendship with the congregation, things like that have been helpful. Not all of that you sort it out at once. Plugging away at it.
So again, it's sort of seeing a medium term rather than the short term.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's great what you're saying. It's encouraging to me because I've been in that situation. I know what it feels like. We have to learn, don't we, as pastors and as leaders in churches? We have to learn sometimes to be able to leave people with the Lord.
Yeah.
And someone leaves church, goes somewhere else, or moves away, and you can't keep pastoring them from a distance. You have to leave them with the Lord. And actually, very intractable situations sometimes. You have to say, Lord, I've tried to help. I've done what I can, but I've got to give it into your hands.
Yeah, we get in our and this is not a complaint. I'm not moaning. I've had more people kind of come. We really like the church. We got to move for work. We got to move on.
Yeah,
and I've seen more members go than kind of come and stay in my time.
Yeah.
And recognizing that gracious pastoring is just getting people to where they need to be going, not necessarily hanging on. If you're giving them up for the sake of the gospel, if they've had some benefit from being in the church and seeing the Lord's, that's a good thing. So that kind of thing. I'm making it sound wonderful. It's not.
Well, I think we all know, don't we? You're being very honest as well. Pastoral work can sometimes be a grind, can't it? And I thought that insight was really helpful. That pastoring is moving towards people. There are people in church, aren't there, who are always moving towards you. There are people who can be quite demanding.
Yeah.
Sometimes justifiably so.
Yeah.
Sometimes just because they're very, they can be abnormally needy. You know what I mean? They can just be a particular drain on you. How do you deal with those kinds of people? How do you make sure that you divide your time wisely? That's always been a real challenge for me. And any wisdom for me on that?
No. Well, so being in a small church, we're quite small. We don't look very successful. So it's not like people are looking at me going, "Oh, I got to be near him. He's the route to power." Okay. Nobody looks at me like that, I don't think. So it's probably a different dynamic. Establishing boundaries over time. The church are very good generally. I do think pastors need to be, approachable when people need them. So there are phone calls in the middle of the night, but they're few and far between. And that's
the nature of pastoral work, isn't it? I mean, I was, when you're talking about a day off, I remember friends in a large church saying, "Got to be, absolutely uncontactable on your day off." And I said, well, actually, the church where I was at the time, church Yateley, if someone dies on my day off, they've got to be able to call me.
Yeah.
So I think the dynamic in a smaller church is a lot of it does fall on you.
Yeah.
And you've got to do what you can within boundaries, but you've also got to have some flexibility around the edges, haven't you?
Yeah. I guess the kind of person you're talking who can be quite intense. Working that over time, that can change, ebb and flow. But I suppose a smaller church, issues of seeming favoritism and stuff can be a big issue, and you've got to watch that and try and be approachable to most people. I want to link with everybody in the congregation, some kind of link, some kind of open door with everybody.
Do you think sometimes, and I don't know if this is true or not where you are, that people feel it needs to be the pastor who's doing the pastoral care? Do you feel under some of that pressure, or do you feel actually there's a good spirit of looking out for one another? Because I've certainly served in a place where people felt, unless the pastor came, that there was no care going on.
I think there is still that view. So I do think like a full-time pastor among the elders, that first among equals view, I do think it's important. I am cautious about the elevation of the pastor.
Sure.
It's got to be him.
Yeah.
I think people will instinctively move towards the person who's preaching the word most and want some kind of leadership. I think we do have a good balance, because actually I've got like a lot of smaller churches who've been together for a long time, there's a lot of mature Christians.
Sure.
So I'm amazed at the way that they move towards each other. that ring each other up. Got some very godly ladies and men and women who are they wouldn't say they were doing it, but they partially care for each other, which is great.
I'm thinking of someone in our church actually who a retired woman who is always sending texts and WhatsApps, and you kind of think I've got to go and see so and so, and you turn up to see so and so, and they say, oh yeah, this woman's been in contact and been texting me every day to encourage me, and you just think, praise the Lord for that. That people like that are like gold dust, aren't they? Really?
Yeah. I get really encouraged when somebody's got a question about something. So I had coffee with someone 4 or 5 weeks ago who just said, look, I'm really troubled about questions my friends are asking me about the gospel. Can you help me? And so we met and talked about the personal evangelism, which is not something that happens where people ask those questions. It was just a thrill.
Yeah.
So that the added impromptu moments are wonderful.
Yeah, they are, aren't they? Yeah. Now, Pete, you've just started serving on the Trust Board.
Yes.
Which is a great help to us. So if people don't know who are listening or watching, the FIEC is obviously an association of churches. That's where the kind of the authority lies in the local churches. And the way that's worked out in the FIEC is we have Trust Board, which is made up of 12 church leaders who are voted for by the churches. And you've just taken that on. So thank you very much. You're here for the Trust Board meeting. So thanks for serving, not just us here, FIEC staff, but actually the whole of the network of churches. We're really grateful for that. We'd love to pray for the church. Just tell us again how we pronounce it. I'm not even going to embarrass myself by trying to do it. I know the Capel bit is the easy bit.
Penrhyndeudraeth. Yes.
Okay.
So it's the village that Bertrand Russell, the philosopher and atheist, lived in, and he died in.
Right. Okay. So is he buried there?
He's got a house there that I often. Obviously he's not there at the moment. But
be empty, wouldn't it?
He might be buried there. Yeah, he's got a house that where he died that I walk past quite a bit. Okay. So yeah.
And for the church, we would love to be praying. Give us 2 or 3 things that we could pray for the church.
So basically, same as everybody, rebuilding back after COVID.
Sure.
We're meeting in a community centre now. We'd love to be gathering more people. We're quite encouraged that there are 2 or 3, our fringe has grown 2 or 3, and one person in particular who's interested in Christian things. So to us, that was really encouragement.
Yeah.
We took on board actually something that we heard John Stevens say at the leaders thing in Cardiff. We were saying to rural pastors, just pray for one conversion.
That's right. Yeah.
And we've kind of taken that on. I've been holding that. Look, let's pray. Let's not pray nebulously for conversions. Let's say, look, Lord, could you give us one? Like in the next 2 or 3 years, we'd like to see one person and soundly converted, brought into the fellowship. And people have got behind that. And it's interesting, since we've been praying that, it's not mystical. We've had contacts with 2 or 3 people.
Great.
So pray for our meetings in the community centre, rebuilding the church. We'd love to do something evangelistically with Passion for Life coming up in East of it. I need to organise that and think about what we're going to do. And the other big prayer is we've got an old building that's a wonderful chapel building, but it is not accessible. And we need to think about what to do with that. So building issues, location issues.
Which can loom very large, can't they?
Yeah,
of course they can.
They mean a lot as well to members who've invested a lot in the church and stuff. So they're big.
Well, we'll be happily praying for those things.
Thank you.
Pete, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a joy just to catch up and to chat. And bless you in your ministry and at home and at church. And indeed, with the Trust Board today, thank you very much for that.
Every blessing.
And,
thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And thank you for joining us on Independence, which is the FIEC podcast. You can subscribe through all the normal channels, and we look forward to meeting you again soon. Thanks.